What's up, Stitt-Heads? We are back. Crack a beer, have a good time. It's the weekend. When I'm also not talking shit conspiracies and comedy and geopolitics and whatever else on the internet, I'm playing in a band and I'm like having a double header tonight. I get the amazing Scott Horton coming on my podcast, and then I get to go play a concert and have some beers with my bros and everything. But guys, the world is going crazy. And this dude is one of the best that I've been listening to for the last 4 or 5 years on the idea of like breaking down, not like, let's take the talking points of what the narrative says on the left and right, and then let's find the reality in between because everybody has their own little spin on things. But either way, without further ado, Scott Horton, man, thanks for coming on and welcome to Talking Stitt. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude. So we've had a ton of Epstein drops in a very interesting kind of timeline of things. Let's jump into that a little bit. What are your opinions on why they've released the things they have? A lot of it's kind of damning evidence. Some of it's kind of just half truth. We don't know if AI or whatnot's involved, but what are your kind of thoughts on these Epstein dumps?
Well, you kind of have to assume the worst behind those redactions, right? Especially where you have pages and pages of redactions. Um, really want to know what a lot of that's about. They say that they're just protecting the identities of innocent victims, but then we can see in what they released that they're protecting the identities of potential criminals all over the place. Even when it's not clear who people are and exactly what they're talking about, they're still clearly not the young girl victims of Epstein. There are people emailing him about, boy, we sure had fun with those young girls yesterday or whatever, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? But their name is blanked out. So, um, not just innocent victims, but potential criminals and potential important associates' identities are protected throughout the thing. So, you
We're
know,
seeing the eyes wide shut kind of like that last third of the movie when Bill is getting talked to by Ziegler and he's telling him like if you knew the people behind those masks at the party, it's like if you knew who it was, it would disrupt everything. Like we're kind of in that mode of like it's a little obvious that they're hiding people for a reason. But my thoughts are it's not necessarily. I mean, both sides of the aisle are all in on this shit. They've been hiding it for years. But the thing is there's CEOs, there's big business people, there's big tech people, there's pharmaceutical people, there's movie stars. It's not just the politicians. So it's like, who are we specifically hiding in these redactions, like you said?
well, there's a great article by Albert J. Nock. It's called Our Enemy, the State. And what he means by that is separate. And, explains it better than me, but he doesn't just mean the government, but by the state, he means the interlocking personal relationships of all the people that make up the government, right? Way we say the deep state nowadays, basically. That
Mm-hmm.
term comes from Turkey and Egypt, where you have a permanent military establishment where the civilian presidents are basically the sock puppets of generals and admirals and whatever with their own kind of secret societies inside the military and that kind of thing. Well, that's kind of how it is here, right? As we learn it in school, the fourth branch of government, where the president is the supposedly the chief executive of all of these government departments, but really they all have a life of their own. And the presidents, and not only that, but all their appointed leaders of all the different departments and agencies, they all come and go while the lifers inside those agencies stay. And a lot of them, of course, when they do go, they go right to the corporations that they had just been in charge of regulating or not regulating or directly subsidizing, contracting with, um, buying weapons from or whatever it is. So you have what they used to call the revolving door, just as like the most basic sort of concept of people in and out of government and in and out of business in a way that is just a massive conflict of interest for everyone involved. And so, especially when it comes to the military, you have companies like Lockheed who, man, I'm sorry, I always forget the name of the plane. It was the last civilian plane they tried to sell in the 1970s. It was like the whatever, I can't remember what it was called, but it was made to compete with the DC 10
Mm-hmm.
and it failed. And I think American Airlines bought a few of them, or Delta bought a few of them, and then we're like, meh, never mind. We're sticking with Boeing products or whatever. And so Lockheed had spent billions of dollars developing this plane that no civilian airline in the world wanted to buy. So they decided, you know what? We're just not going to deal with the market anymore. Screw that. Take a risk? No way. Instead, we're simply going to make weapons for the Pentagon. And then on top of that, you know what we're going to do too? Is we're going to finance the think tanks that write the studies about where we need to have a foreign policy. That way, we'll know what kind of weapons to make because we'll be deciding where they're going to be used. So do we need to make jungle boat equipment, or do we need to make, tanks and armored personnel carriers for desert sand, or, whatever it is.
They became like the Yamaha brand. We'll make you a dirt bike or a keyboard. Yeah.
Exactly right. So they just put, the cart before the horse, right? We want to sell weapons. So how can we get America into a mess so that we can sell weapons to it? Which you might say that's inevitable, but then it should be inevitable that everybody else in the country is organized to stop them then, that we don't all just become prisoners to the interests of small groups of people feeding from the trough.
We get incentivized by the profit. Yeah.
That's right. Unfortunately, the system is so broken. There's really nothing that we can do about it. In fact, maybe this is the largest take of the Epstein thing, right? For people not too familiar with it, the real lesson, the overall lesson of the Epstein thing is that the guy wasn't just a pimp and a pervert, but that he was incredibly connected, as you say, to leaders of all different industries. And he's working clearly on behalf of Israeli intelligence, but also on behalf of himself, just as sort of making himself useful as kind of the ultimate fixer and networker and associate of others, right? If you are in the business world or you're in the scientific world and you need donations from rich business philanthropists, you go to this guy and he gets you all laid at the same party, and then he gets your science funded, right? Or whatever it is. So he made himself the center of so many networks of people.
He became a Don Corleone,
West.
man. Yeah, he tried to mafia that shit.
Exactly. So he was like, yeah, you would consider him like one of the very highest ranking enforcers in the Western, American / Israeli mob. And as you said, both parties are implicated. Not just that, but leaders all over the world and in all these different industries, as you said, in academia and in science and in media and in Silicon Valley and in wherever, all of these people are involved in all this. And then what we can see about them all is they're all a bunch of degenerate scum. None of them are better people than you or me or even some idiot or a bad guy that like maybe your brother robbed a store one time. They're still not better people than him.
No,
right?
yeah.
They're just, at best, they're just regular people. And on the average day, actually, they're quite a bit worse than us and not even necessarily smarter or anything else. They either were born rich or they just figured out exactly, how to bet against what market. In fact, he says in there, he jokes that, essentially the real world is for the Goyim.
Yes,
the way
sir.
I'm making my money right now is betting against international shipping futures. Well, what do you and I know about that, right? As we clock in for our 9 to 5, and this guy gets to bet somebody else's money on some rigged game and just, dip his hand in the trough. And he has in the emails a British lord telling him, hey, the EU bailout is about to go through.
Yeah.
Which is like a huge, insider trading tip on the value of the euro being saved by a bailout from the dollar and all this going on. So,
Rothschild connections, everything. You're like, it's an octopus, dude. It just goes everywhere.
And at the end of all that, when you go, yes, they are essentially all skull and bones. They all essentially are all like
jerking off in their coffin.
Yeah, in a sense, they're all like, a bunch of weirdos and degenerates and whatever, insiders, scum, and in many cases like real criminals, including crimes against minors and things, as we've obviously has been discussed. And yet we don't even think that there's anything we can do about it other than, on the marginal cases, we can like protect Thomas Massie for getting the documents out when the Israel lobby is going to try to overthrow him. But like, You notice, in fact, I saw somebody point out, you notice there's not too many congressmen and senators in there because they're basically irrelevant. They don't really need to be blackmailed. There's enough of
100%.
them.
Yes.
Yeah, they could just be bribed a little bit, and on the margin, their powers basically doesn't even matter. What matters is control of Wall Street and the presidency, and the intelligence agencies and all this kind of stuff. And
Well,
so,
this Epstein shit, though, sorry to cut you off. I just you
go
got me
ahead.
thinking, like, excuse me, with the Epstein shit, like, you see that, like, it's the tip of the iceberg meme, where you see the
Mhm.
iceberg up here and it's this thing, and then there's 50 other things labeled underneath it. It's a big revelation to a lot of people where, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, still talking about that guy, whatever. Yeah, we are talking about that guy, but what most people know about him is, like you brought up, that, well, the minors thing, and we're not discrediting that or making it any less evil than it is. But once you dig in, like some people, like you've probably been digging in. I've been on the Epstein case and all the Pizzagate and all the other shit, and it's like for like a decade. And then we're looking back now, going like, wait, that doesn't mean everything's right, but there's a lot of shit that we were labeled crazy people for that we need to go back and reevaluate now, because
Yeah.
it's not just the whole like, oh, 15-year-olds that want to act like 21-year-olds kind of thing or whatever, or
No.
even
Yeah.
if they were willing is what I'm getting at. But I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, dude, there's a lot of darker shit. The web of everything, the control of every country, the new world order, basically. I mean, is exactly what it is. And Canada just said the damn words "new world order" out loud a week or two ago. Mark
No, that
Carney or
doesn't
whatever
mean
his name.
anything, though. No,
No, that's just conspiracy.
no, everybody says that all the time, and it means whatever you want it to mean, so it's never wrong. That's why it's useless, right?
I got you.
It's
Yeah.
the New World Order was supposed to mean the grand design of building a one world federal government under the United Nations. Well, that's not what we're talking about. I think America and Russia and China are all in a big secret
No,
alliance together building a
no,
world government right now. Right. So there is no New World Order. That's not what it is. It's the West. It's fucking America and Israel, right?
100%.
And corruption and the only thing New World Order about it is just abuse of power, but you could call that anything. You
Hey,
know,
we love wrestling in my house. New World Order to me is Hulk
yeah, there
Hogan,
you go.
Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. But yeah, exactly.
And even when Bush Sr. said it, and he was the bonesman, but even when he said it, he wasn't really saying build up the United Nations. He was saying build up American power. And yeah, sure, sometimes using UN resolutions as the excuse, but as the excuse for what? Something for America to enforce. Where that's the real world government, if there is one at all, is just Washington, D.C. But it's hard to be a world government when Russia and China and India are not subsumed under it. You
They're
know what
not
I
compliant.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're wanting
So
to do their own thing, whether right or wrong. But yeah,
that's right.
exactly.
And that's why we hate them so much, is just because they have independence from us. That's
Hate
all.
us because they ain't
You
us.
know,
Yeah.
that's right. And but the right wing kind of New World Order conspiracy was always that the UN is coming here, that ultimately we are to be the object of this takeover. But no, that ain't right. It's everyone else is the object of ours. And that's
We're
how it's
fighting the
been
blue
for 35
helmets.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So where do we? I mean, what do you see with like the idea of total? Like, okay, you're. I think you're right. Like, on the idea of like it's not. Maybe it was our idea of calling it a new world order so we could be the world superpower, which we've seen for, obviously, let's just say, at least the last 35 years. I
Yeah.
just turned 36 back in October. So I'm like, okay, ever since my birth, it's been one war,
Mhm.
one war, one war, one war. Well, they're not really wars. They're skirmishes, or they're conflicts, or wink wink, because we bypass Congress. But my point is, like, yeah, you're right on the fact that it's the West. The West wants to be the New World Order, not a UN idea of all the nations coming together, peace hippy dippy shit or nothing. It's like, no, we are the superpower, and we're gonna let you know that. But what's your thoughts on the irony of, like, America's technically turning 250 this year, and there's that great nations rise and fall around the 250-year mark. Like,
Yeah.
are we pushing our freaking, luck at the Vegas table, so to speak? Like, you know what I'm kind of saying?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything magic about that number necessarily, but I would say that, in fact, if you're kind of a conspiracy guy, I'm sure you're familiar with Carol Quigley and his book Tragedy and Hope,
I've heard of it.
um,
Yes, yes.
where, yeah, so in that book, it's kind of an insider's account of a lot of the history of the 20th century, and including, what he calls what, is commonly referred to, I guess, as the old Eastern liberal establishment. But he just talks a lot out of school kind of about the things that were supposed to be, more or less behind the scenes still. And that's why people value it so much. He was Bill Clinton's professor at Georgetown University, actually.
Ooh, okay,
And
gotcha.
so there's like a lot of insider stuff in there. You'll see, like, in conspiracy literature, a lot of citations of Carroll Quigley. Anyway, but here's my point though, is the reason the book is called Tragedy and Hope is because he says the tragedy is that civilizations blow their brains out. They commit suicide. They always do. But the hope is that we can learn from history and that we can choose instead to be conservative, to be prudent, to be careful, and to preserve the very best of what we've got. And he says, and you don't have to agree with his, school of historicism or whatever, but the way he looks at it is that Western civilization has been able to reinvent itself from Greek, dominated culture to then Rome, to then the Holy Roman Empire and Christendom, and then, through the Reformation and the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. And we're still the West. Somehow we were able to stay the West through all of this kind of tumult and redefinition over the time.
Hmm.
But there ain't nothing magical about that any more than the number 250, right? The thing is it's decisions that men make, good ones and bad ones, that determine, which way we go and how well we last. And I think, anybody in, familiar with these kind of topics at all could immediately start rattling off that, like, hey, for example, our monetary system is completely corrupt and it completely undermines a prosperous and free economy.
That's the scary
Inflation
part.
is
Yeah.
theft, and it's so destructive, and the boom bust cycle that it causes, and all of these things. Well, that's a symptom of world empire. You have to have easy money if you're going to have a world empire. Otherwise, you got to
Mm.
raise people's taxes every time you want to start a war, and they're not going to let you, right? So you got to have a corrupt monetary system. And now that you have a corrupt monetary system, you ruin 15 other things about society. You completely de-incentivize saving or disincentivize saving at all. And encouraging higher time preferences, encouraging businesses to take bad loans, that eventually when the cycle comes is going to break them. That happens over and over again.
Aren't
And
we
all this
about
is
to experience that again? Almost like, okay, so I graduated high school in 2008. And I remember, like, okay, I went to a high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma called Union High School. It damn near looks like a college nowadays. Like, it's massive. It's one of the bigger high schools in Tulsa. But my point is that a shitload of rich kids. I was driving a 95 Ford Taurus for my first car, and other people were driving 2006 Lexuses and shit. I'm like, okay, I'm the blue collar family kid. But I would see friends of mine that, like, had gotten loans right out the gate because their parents bought them a nice house and blah 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 because they're going to college, and just fall apart immediately. We're about to kind of experience this economy crash, like you're bringing up, like with money. Our monetary system is bullshit. It's crappy. Our age of owning a new home, or owning a home as a home, first time homeowner, is hitting damn near 40 years old. It's like, so Trump's wanting to get rid of the interest and things like that. So it's like we're about to almost, like you said, man, like we're learning from history, but we just keep repeating the retarded part of history sometimes
that's
too.
right.
It's
Yep.
like we
Even
need
think
to
of that last
learn.
part. Even think about what you're saying. We have people can't get into a house. So Trump wants to force interest rates down. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to drive up demand and the cost of houses,
We've seen this
right?
before. Yeah.
So, yeah. So he's saying, oh, you know why you can't afford a house? Interest rates are too high. Let me force them down for you. But then he's just jacking up the price because he's artificially jacking up demand. When
Bingo.
what and this is the thing that right wingers and left wingers just hate this truth that, like, screw your national economic policy. What we need is laissez-faire free market economics with
Yes.
hard money, property rights, and contracts. And then that's it. Let the prices of housing rise and fall according to market conditions. Keep
Bingo.
government out of it. Because look at what we're talking about right here. I'm sure your audience may have seen the clip of Donald Trump talking about this over the last few weeks. And people saying that prices of houses are so high. And he says, well, listen, we don't want those prices to go down because so many Americans, they have their entire wealth, all their equity is in their house, which of course, it's not really that useful to them. It's just the equity in their house or whatever. It's not like it's actual like wealth that they can use to invest in new businesses and create new wealth or whatever. It's just their home.
My
But
dad's
anyway,
owned the same house for almost 40 years and it's basically double value. He's taking care of it, but like without doing a damn thing to it, it's
right,
doubled value, but that's inflation prices. But yes, you're right.
exactly. And so now Trump is saying, I can't let your dad down, even though it was Bush and Obama that built him up. It wasn't the actual, like, he didn't improve the house that much, right? What happened was they just devalued the money, right? And so, but Trump says, we cannot let those housing prices come down because the people who are already in their homes now, the owners of homes, at least, if not the renters, the owners of homes, they will be taking a hit on that, which is, again, it's not exactly right. I mean, if you own your home and you're going to keep owning it, then you might just get a break on your property taxes for a few years if the value were to go down right now. If you're not selling it at a loss, then it ain't that bad. But then he actually finished the sentence with, and look, if younger people can't afford a house, then that's just because they're not working hard enough. And we don't want to increase supply. And he's making this sound like it's all up to him, right? He's the commander and controller of the economy. We don't
Right.
want to increase the supply to make it easier for people who don't work hard enough to buy a house. Because, in other words, Donald Trump was told, look, man, or he knows in his head, he's a real estate guy. Here's how it works. There's winners and losers. You're the world emperor. You decide who wins and who loses.
I'm the winner,
Some
you're the
people
loser. Yeah.
tough. That's right. Baby boomers are going to be mad at me and not vote Republican in the midterms if I allow the market to correct the overly hyped value of their homes. And so I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to keep and then what does that mean? That means that he's George W. Bush.
Yeah.
That means that he's Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. And
False
we saw
economies.
what
Yes.
happened. Bill
Yes.
Clinton and W. Bush funneled by government choice, funneled all this money into housing, and then it led to the Great Depression of our era, of the
And
crash of
they all
2008.
point at the last guy before them and they get away with it every damn
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Well, I'm red, he's blue, or I'm blue, he's red. The other asshole did the problem, not me.
But the thing is, I mean, we all lived through the crash. I mean, and that's exactly where we're headed again, with
Mhm.
these artificially high prices. And the thing is, it's because, well, let's talk about this then. As long as we're talking about inflation. Here's the thing
Yeah.
about inflation, okay? The prices on your shelf, the prices for your groceries, the prices for lumber, the prices for energy, the prices for whatever are going up, 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 up. Why? It's because the value of the money is going down, 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 down. Why? Because the government and the banks are expanding the money supply. The
Mhm.
government lets the banks create new money. When they make a loan, they make loans of new money. And the government lets them do that as long as the banks promise to buy government debt with that new money that they create too.
Mhm.
And as long as the banks promise to keep buying government debt, then the government promises to continue to license the banks to create money. And then the government also creates brand new money in order to buy up its own and other bad debt with new money.
Because they're
And
too big
so
to fail, wink wink.
that's right. This is all, and everyone listening heard that right. This is all welfare for billionaires. This is all
Basically,
welfare for bankers, for the
we're a
people who
socialist
need it
country,
the
whether they
least.
like it or not.
That's right. Now, but here's the real problem with this, because the when the prices are going up, 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 up on your shelf, that's the same as them picking dollars right out of your pocket. It's no different than them taxing you, no different than them just holding the gun to your head and robbing you. Okay. But here's even worse than that is when you have inflation, what happens is businesses, especially businesses that do business with other businesses higher up the chain, like quarries and mines
Hmm.
and like large industrial concerns, airplane manufacturing facilities, and like these huge investment type projects, agribusiness too. They make bad business decisions based on prevailing interest rates, when those interest rates are dictated by the commie government in Washington
Mhm.
instead of by fair market prices and banks deciding on their own what kind of interest rates they want to charge. And they're not entirely dictated, but they're very heavily influenced by Federal Reserve policy, right?
Mhm.
So what happens is you have what the economist Ludwig von Mises called the cluster of errors, where you end up having all kinds of different businessmen all making very bad bets at the very same time, taking out loans that ultimately they won't be able to pay back, because when they're creating all this new money, they're not really creating new wealth, right? They're just creating new money. So it makes it seem as though this is savings that is real capital that can be invested in new projects. But the thing is, the money doesn't represent new wealth that's been created. It's just new currency, right? And so it's a lie,
Yeah,
essentially.
the
All
piece of
these
lumber is still the
businessmen,
same piece of lumber. Yeah,
that's right.
exactly. Yes.
Exactly. So yeah, in Mises' analogy, the pile of bricks that the master home builder has to work with is still only the number of bricks that it ever was. No matter if the government gives you a phony piece of paper that gives you a higher number on it, there's
Hmm.
still only this many bricks available. So in fact, that's the analogy is if the master builder thinks he has more bricks than he really has, he's going to start to build a house and find out he doesn't have enough bricks to finish it.
Yes.
Okay. That is the same thing with all these businesses across the economy. And that's what causes a crash like what happened in 2008. The same thing happened in 1999 with the dot-com crash.
Hmm.
So same thing you learned in school, if they taught you anything at all, about the bubble of 27 through 29 that popped in 29
Yeah.
and inaugurated the beginning of the Great Depression. What was that? The Federal Reserve wasn't created as part of the New Deal. The Federal Reserve was created by Woodrow Wilson 20 years before.
Yeah. Like
And it was
Tripoli
the
talks about,
Federal.
he'd fight Woodrow Wilson for charity.
That's right. We all would. So it's because of they created the Fed first, and the Fed pumped up that bubble at the end of the 20s that popped, and that was what led to the Great Depression in the first place. Now, the way they taught it to me in school, and probably you, was that it was the wild excesses of laissez-faire free market capitalism in the 20s that
Hmm.
caused that bubble. And that was why we needed FDR to institute all these great new programs under the New Deal to smooth out the excesses of free market capitalism. But it wasn't the free market. It was the government phony money system, the
Yes.
inflationary money system that had caused the bubble, that caused the crash. And then, in fact, all those government programs ended up prolonging the Depression for another 10 years when the correction was already over by the time FDR was even inaugurated. The crash was in the end of 29. He wasn't sworn in until March of 33. All the bad debts had already been written off. They were ready to
Hmm.
get going again. And then he came and screwed up everything for another decade.
Right in the
Anyway,
coattails of it, dude. I love it.
that's
You're
right.
cooking. You're fucking cooking with gas
I'm
right
good.
now, and I'm loving this, dude.
All
Yeah.
right, so then let's skip a few because the same thing happens through, the world wars, not Korea, but during Vietnam had a boom and bust. And
Hmm.
then, of course,
Gold
the
standard.
inflation of
Yep.
the 70s. There's a bust in 87 and in 92 and 99 in 2008, like we talked about. But then, so let's skip forward now to in the aftermath of 2008. That happened at the very end of W. Bush, and then he was gone. And Barack Obama comes in and does the huge, and Bush started it with all the bailouts and all the TARP funds. And this is essentially um, the Federal Reserve making all the banks whole. No bank has to really suffer and go out of business. They'll all get bailed out by the Fed and bailed out by us. All these Wall Street firms start paying all their executives bonuses with our bailout money
Yep.
immediately. There's a worse thing. They call it quantitative easing. And that meant they would create all this new money to make all the banks whole, but then at least smartly, and I think this is because Ron Paul was the angel on Ben Bernanke's shoulder, warning about inflation. He came up with a scheme that said the Federal Reserve will pay an extra premium to the banks to keep their new money at the Fed instead of loaning it out. So even though he created a bunch of new money in order to bail out those banks, he also paid them not to loan it out and multiply it out into the society where it would have ended up causing much more price inflation. So that was the scam then, but they still had built up a huge bubble. And there was a lot of real economic activity, but there was a lot of real bubble activity from Obama. And then do you remember during Trump 1,
Hmm.
he was desperate, just the same way he's fighting the Fed and wants lower interest rates now. This is the same thing then. And the reason why is because he knew it had been since we had a big correction. And he was desperately afraid that that correction would come on his watch while he was still in power there. So he was saying, lower the interest rates, lower them, lower them, lower them, lower them,
I
let the
do.
economy
Yes.
collapse on the next guy's watch, not mine. But then what
Yes.
happened? Remember what happened? It wasn't the Federal Reserve raising the interest rates. It was the germ.
The
And they
COVID.
locked
You can
down the
say it all,
whole.
dude. Don't worry about trigger words on this show.
Oh no,
Yes.
I just
No, I know
yeah,
you're right. We try to
that's how I talk.
self-correct ourselves sometimes just because we know the internet. Like, we're like, I'll self-police a tiny bit, but fuck the government anyways. But
That's not
but
it. I
oh
just
go
call it the germ because nobody else calls it that, and I like calling it my own thing instead of what other people tell me to call things.
okay, well, I
So,
like that too. I
like,
thought you were
I
just being
never
like the
say
gentle pedal.
9/11. I always say September 11th because that's the way you say dates of things, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
Anyway, that's just me. But anyway, the thing of it is, in the name of the germ, they essentially forced a recession. It was no different than if they had cranked interest rates way, way, way up and forced a crash. Because by locking everyone in their homes, essentially locking down all this business, they forced, I mean, who knows, millions of businesses out of business, right? They
Family
completely
businesses,
destroyed,
yeah. Cut
yeah,
them out.
exactly,
Yeah.
and just completely suppressed economic activity in the trillions. But then what they do? They immediately created trillions of new dollars, again, new currency
Mm-hmm.
to make up for all the wealth they destroyed and bail out, especially the biggest corporations at the top. You and your family got a check for $1 or $2,000. The trillions all went to big business and the connected and state governments and all of that.
And that
And
was a
so
joke that a lot of us, even some people that were still in the left and right binary, they're like, well, I don't really want the check. And it's this stupid thing where you're like, well, whether you want it or not, it's still getting printed. I mean, it's still getting printed to everybody else. Like, you can have this protest of like, well, I'm not going to accept mine. You're like, well, the okay, your $1,200 check didn't get printed, whatever. But yeah, it's like the biggest transaction of money or whatever in our history or whatever. Like,
there's 1/3 of all the dollars ever created. Right.
insane.
And so then as soon as Trump was gone and they started lifting all the lockdowns, it was all part of a color coded revolution and get rid of him, really.
Bingo. Yeah, yeah.
But once they lifted all that and allowed economic activity to take place again, and it was really, once they got the vaccines came out in like the winter of 20 and into 21. So that was when they started letting people, lifting the lockdown, especially in the Democrat states. They finally started lifting the lockdown stuff. But then, so all of that money that they had printed, and a lot of that was like direct payments from the treasury to people and to the corporations.
Mhm.
All that money then went and got circulated. And that's what caused the massive price inflation that we've had since then. And it wasn't just Biden, it was Trump, the CARES Act that Trump had passed that Massey opposed and tried to stop him in 2020.
Mhm.
That plus then when Biden came in, he did another CARES Act of his own, maybe two, and then plus the giant infrastructure bill, which was all new money. None of that was capital that had been saved up by the people, worked for, saved up, taxed, and then reinvested in things. It was all inflationary money paying for all of it. And
And then
so
just a week or so ago, sorry to cut you off again, man. Sorry, but just a week or so ago, Massey was going against the money that were all the Republicans right now are bitching about the Somali fraud and everything else. And then you're like, oh, by the way, we're going to send all this extra money to these other programs again. You're like, can we please have consistency? Because it's like guys like you and me, some of our friends might probably look at us and be like, you guys are just too black pill. You're too negative. I'm like, no, the shit around us is like, it's just energy harvesting, tiny conspiracy mode. But I'm just saying, like, do people on both sides not being realize they're being played at this point? It's like you get a talking point for 2 weeks on CNN or Fox News, everybody gets riled up and angry, jack your loose your energy, and then you forget about it 2 weeks later because the next thing comes along and Donald Trump secretly passes some bill to give
yeah.
money back to those same things you were just bitching about two
To
weeks
be
ago.
fair, to be fair though, I don't recall anyone saying, "I believe the Republicans are going to put an end to this for me."
Oh, I know, but
Right?
there's still some
People were
crazy
mad.
MAGA. But go
Yeah,
ahead, yeah.
people were pissed off, but I don't think anybody really thought, "Oh, now we're going to have a change because of some tweets or whatever." But
You're right, you're right,
anyways,
you're right.
but point being though that this is the cause of the price inflation now, and then that's reflected not just in the prices on your shelves, but again in these massive economic distortions that then demand massive corrections. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why. And look, man, people should have figured by now and probably do. Don't get me wrong. Like I even still, even though he's the one in the chair and everything, I still hate Trump's enemies more than him mostly. Like I'm not trying to pick on him explicitly, like as like, oh, a worse president than the others because he's an outsider or something like the way the Never Trumpers do. I don't
I'm
mean
with
it
you
like
on
that.
that. Yeah.
But
I
I'm
voted
just
for him in
saying,
2016. So I was like,
yeah,
yeah.
like what we need is Ron Paul. But why do we need Ron Paul? Is because he actually understands why liberty works. He actually knows not just the first thing, but a lot about
Fiscal
Austrian school economics.
conservatism and Austrian economics. And
That's
yes,
right. So,
exactly.
but Trump is really like the exact, he might as well be Bill Clinton on this issue, right? He is the exact opposite of Ron Paul. Ron Paul is saying, listen, we need hard money. We need to let all the bad bets fail and get written off. The people should not be subsidizing zombie companies of any kind. We should not be giving welfare payments to businessmen to keep them in business in any way. If they got to go to bankruptcy court, they got to go to bankruptcy court. But then we're going to have a sound and honest monetary system so that we don't have to keep having these terrible booms and busts and people can actually have a free and prosperous economy.
Hmm.
Donald Trump isn't willing to suffer a massive correction to get us onto a proper footing of a sound free market capitalist economy. He just wants to put off the bust. He just wants to make sure that he is out of power before the next bust comes. And what's funny is actually when I very, very first learned about the Federal Reserve and inflation, um, one of the very first things I learned about the Fed was that supposedly the reason that it's independent from the government, maybe like sort of like the way the Justice Department is supposed to be more independent from the White House, even than
Hmm.
other executive agencies or departments, is because the president and the Congress will always want to inflate. They will always want to keep inflating and inflating and inflating because to them, the short term pain of a crash is worse than any long term problem caused by inflation. And so the
Hmm.
Fed has to be insulated from those political incentives so that they can do the right thing. And as they would put it in their analogy, they would say the job of the Federal Reserve Chairman is to take away the punch bowl at the party right when everybody's starting to get too wasted. He's
Yeah.
supposed to make sure that they don't get carried away. Where a president or a congressman, a senator, will never take away the punch bowl.
He'll
They
pour
want to
more
just,
into it. Yeah.
that's right. Keep it going. Keep it going. I've got an election coming up.
Give me another bottle of vodka, dump it
That's
in
right.
there. Yeah,
So I'm not
exactly.
saying that that is an argument for the independence of the Fed, but I am saying they are right about that, that the politicians have what, the economists call a high time preference.
Hmm.
They want things the way they want it to be now, and they're not willing to sacrifice now for a better future. They
Yeah.
need
They
now
want they
for their
want it.
reelection
It's like
campaign.
their
Yeah,
unlimited credit card at the moment to
that's
use
right.
for, and then it is ironic that like everybody knows the term. Like you just get into like breaking down words. Sometimes you're like, yeah, the Federal Reserve. You heard that a million times in your life, and you're like, when you find out they're not federal and they have no reserves, you're like, what? Wait, do what? What is
They
what
are
is the
federal.
federal? Well, I mean, but
You're
I'm just
they
kind of
definitely
joking.
don't have
Like
reserves though.
I'm just joking on the idea
Yeah.
of like, you start breaking down, you're like, yeah, no shit, I've heard that term a million times in my life. What is the Federal Reserve
Right.
then? Oh, they're the guys making their life a little harder, and then you
Right.
get all these politicians bleeding them dry and doing. So I get what you're saying about that, but
Yeah.
it is interesting that like, the gold, silver, all these prices are going through the roof right now, and there's certain people that are actually like, I mean, it is a good thing if you're a gold or silver, owner, but it's also generally a little bit of a sign of a declining dollar in most, most countries. When precious metals and stuff start rising through the roof, it means the fiat currency is starting to fail. And
Yep.
then you got like some of the worst, examples of like Weimar Germany and shit like that. You're like, man, like, I don't know. They always say history repeats itself, but do you think, okay, I want to ask
That could
something.
happen here. That
That's what
could
I'm
happen.
kind of getting at. Like,
Yes.
are we looking at some kind of big financial collapse that we could use? Like, we were just talking about the Federal Reserve, the conspiracy brain. I haven't, verified 100% on this, but every time the Patriots won the Super Bowl, there was usually an invasion of some kind,
Yeah.
whether it's Syria, Iraq, or this or that, all the 7 countries, Wesley C. Clark, all that shit.
Yeah, but there's
But
always a war.
I know there's always an excuse for a war, and there's always a wink, wink, like a look for tinfoil hat time. I get that, but I'm also saying we have the Patriots back in, and we have like our dollar kind of collapsing day by day, and we're like, wait a minute, are the Patriots about to win the Super Bowl so we can go fucking invade Iran or Venezuela or some boots on
That's
ground?
funny.
That way we can raise money again, false economy, because
It's funny because
I don't know.
people
You kind
do.
of see where I'm going.
Yeah, and look, a lot of people sometimes do believe or assume that the reason we go to war is to force these countries to stay on the dollar. And they say, Saddam was trying to de-dollarize and Gaddafi's trying to
Gaddafi, yeah.
de-dollarize, so we go in there and kill them and make sure. But I'll tell you what, waging a world empire to force countries to use your currency is a real good way to destroy your currency, where no amount of violence is going to convince people to continue to use it. They can't rely on it, they'll abandon it. And good money chases out bad, or bad money chases out good. So yeah, maybe that was the bad example. But anyway, the point being that I'm not a master economist. I don't know like every last jet debt to GDP ratio that ended up in what kind of problem. I know that there are a lot of countries through history who thought that they were immune to this, and hell, there's a lot of countries, and you hear talk like this among maybe not our central bankers, but you hear like conventional wisdom like this in Washington, where people are like, we kind of need to inflate so we can afford these rising prices, right? Like
Hmm.
they don't understand that they are the ones driving up the prices with their new money. They just cannot look at, causes before effects, and so they just continue on. And I think what Ron Paul's always warned about was what Mises called the crack up boom. And this is what happened in Germany, which is just where confidence in the currency is just lost. And now it's a race to get rid of every last cent that you got. If you can buy anything with it, it'll retain its value better than the currency, which is going completely in the toilet. And look, I mean, there's a reason that inflationary money is one of the major 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. It's because if you want to destroy a country's economy and revolutionize their poor against the wealthy, then what you want to do is destroy the wealth of the middle class, which is denominated in the local currency. And you just destroy the local currency and they just got nothing. They had a savings and now it's worth nothing.
Now you
And
made
so
the
now
anger
they're
against the
desperate.
wealth. Yes.
That's right. So there's a reason why the communists have this. It's because that's how you separate what they call the bourgeoisie from
Hmm.
their meager amounts of capital. And why? So that you can then make it the very few rich against the very many poor who you just made very poor,
Hmm.
to revolutionize the thing. But so if you don't want communism, and you do in fact want a large middle class, then you need hard money. And the problem is, of course, is it's like a specialized concern. They call people who want hard money, they call us gold bugs. Oh, that guy's a gold bug, which means what? Like, oh, you're just Gollum going, wow, it's so shiny. Instead of, no, man, it's because you read books and you understand why this has been used as currency over the last 3,000 years
Hmm.
and why it's useful as one and could be now. No, you're a bug, dude. You're a weirdo. You got a weird thing for gold. Yeah, like all humanity has a weird thing for gold and always has. That's the point. It ain't
Since
just me.
since we found
Okay.
gold for the first time. Yes, exactly.
That's right.
But any type of thing that like I'm a guitar player, so like whether it's a $4,000 guitar, it might dip a tiny bit, it might actually go up, but it's still going to retain the majority of the value. Whether you buy a '67 Corvette, it's going to retain the majority of the value, or it actually might increase, just like gold. Like if you have something of value, it's gonna retain. It's not like you said, people making fun of, oh, you're Gollum, that's precious. No, it's just because it's actually backed and literally worth something. It's got, whether it's craftsmanship or whether it's just the value of its own, it's an actual item that is worth value, and our pieces of paper are not that anymore.
Yep. And look, I mean, the bottom line about gold is girls. You know, that's as good it's good for is women like it. It's got industrial uses and so forth.
Hmm.
But
Diamonds
people
are
make
fake and overvalued, and girls still love those too, you know?
they
So it's
still
like
love
if
those
there's a
too.
market, there's a market. Yeah.
That's right. And men love women, so that's the way that goes, you know. And it's always
Hey,
been that
are
way.
you a
Always been.
professor? Can you actually say that? No, I mean, I'm joking. I'm joking.
I am certainly not.
Nowadays,
I'm a junior college dropout, is what I am.
hey man, I got 3 kids, so I know men love women. Yes, they wouldn't be here if I didn't.
That's right.
But I'm just joking. But yeah, dude, what do you think? Coming a little bit of a close here, about 10 minutes, but I want to something that like gets brought up all the time, the big boogeyman of the world, Russia. And I just started thinking about this for a minute, you know, and what are your thoughts on like why we think Russia, especially maybe in current times, like are we just being this hangover from the Cold War era, or like because Putin's talking about trying to drive out demons and crazy shit in the world and whatever, like meaning saying like the West has kind of
Yeah.
lost their mind and like the transgender this and the whatever this, like Putin.
Yeah.
I'm not defending Putin, but in some of his thoughts when he talks, you're like, well, he seems a little based, but then everybody still uses like Russia as the big boogeyman of the world. Why do you think that is?
I mean, in a lot of ways, dude, it's because we're the communists now, and
Mm,
they are the conservative, red, white, and blue Christian capitalist country
mm-hmm,
trying to fend off our revolution. And, you know, it's not obviously full state ownership and Marxist collectivism and whatever, but it's got a lot of that, you know, like cultural commie type stuff in it. And, you know, very much they call it, you know, globo homo or whatever. Like the
mm-hmm,
top priority of the American State Department is to twist the arms of every nation in the world to make them fly rainbow flags and change all their laws, you know, around all of that kind of thing, or whatever. And, you know, much of the world is very conservative and don't understand why that is supposed to always be their highest priority and whatever. So I think that's a lot of it is this kind of left-wing culture war against essentially because of its isolation by communism all those years, probably to a degree, something of a older, um, a more conservative Christian civilization from a little bit earlier era than us, right? Almost like,
great point, dude.
you know,
Yeah,
like Mexican music, you know, will adapt American themes like 10 years later or 20 years later or whatever. It's the
yeah,
same kind of thing here. We're like, they're where we were in the 80s or 90s when it comes to gay marriage and, you know, whatever type cultural stuff, right?
mm-hmm,
I think that is part of it, but you know, mostly in the largest sense, it's simply that when Putin came to power in 2000, he essentially very quickly rounded up all of the oligarchs and he told them, look, if you try to participate in politics, I'll kill you.
mm-hmm,
So just get out. But if you want to do business, but you're willing to recognize that I'm the president of the government and that makes me the boss around here, not you, then you can stay. So, you know, he was still a gangster and these guys were still corrupt oligarchs. But the sort of free for all chaos of every billionaire for himself between seven warring gangsters in the 1990s was over. Now
mm-hmm.
there's one gangster, and you guys are all welcome to join my mob. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who controls the Gestapo around here, not
You
you. I
fall in
will win,
line or
not
you
you.
fall in the pile of
That's
bodies.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but in doing so, what was he doing? Is he's really declaring independence from the United States and Israel and our, you know,
Yeah.
or at least a lot of dual citizens up to a lot of no good there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, Yeltsin was drunk. Yeltsin was pwned. Yeltsin was America's guy. And, but Vladimir Putin is not a drinker, right? Vladimir Putin is all business. And from his point of view, his top priority was reestablishing the independence and just the overall stability of the Russian Federation. And he did that.
The
But he
pride,
did
in a
it.
way, he kind of did. He built the pride back in
He
their
did.
country
But look, you
after
know
the
what?
fall of communism. Yeah.
It's just like we talked about how your dad was put on welfare by George Bush and Barack Obama, who doubled the value of his house by debasing the currency. Well,
Yeah.
it was actually George Bush and Barack Obama who helped Vladimir Putin rebuild Russia. When W. Bush invaded Iraq, he tripled the price of a gallon of gas, triple the price of a barrel of oil.
That's when I first started driving. So yes, I remember.
Yeah.
I was like, "What the fuck?" I just
I was a
started
cab
driving.
driver and I was like, I gotta quit.
I'm like, Jesus.
I was filling up a Crown Vic for $20.
I mean, I'm in
Now it's
Oklahoma, and
35.
it was
Yeah.
$5 a gallon in Oklahoma, which sounds cheaper than maybe New York or something, but it was still
Oh,
like,
but no,
what
it's
the
up.
hell?
Yeah. So it was America. It was George W. Bush's war because the Russians are oil exporters. So it was America's war in the Middle East that helped Putin be able to afford to really rebuild the country
Mm-hmm.
and set up, more or less a stable market. It's essentially as corrupt as America's, crony capitalist system. Um, but again, the American doctrine is that every nation must bow down. But the problem with the Russians is they got H bombs and they don't have to. Oh, you know what? Here's a good way to explain it, maybe. I always take too long to say this, but I'll try to say it faster this time.
You're
After
cool.
World War One, America had helped Britain and France completely, and Russia completely destroy Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And well, especially Britain and France, because the Russians had already dropped out after the revolution. But um, they and it wasn't that they occupied all of Germany and destroyed it, but it was through the Versailles Treaty and through
Mm-hmm.
economic warfare and the blockade and everything. They stripped them of all their outlying territories. They put all these war reparations on them. They drove them to their knees and then kicked them in the nuts. And it was horrible. And everyone agreed. Everyone agreed in America anyway that it was their fault for causing the rise of Hitler. That Britain and France, by kicking the Germans while they were down and as brutally as they did, set the stage for the rise of the Nazi Party.
Mm-hmm.
And when Hitler began his rise, he would give every speech would begin denouncing the traitors of 1918 who had signed the Versailles Treaty with Britain and France. Lady Astor. Someone said, "Where was Hitler
Mm-hmm.
born?" And she said, "At Versailles." Right? This is like a cliche, okay?
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah.
knows. Now, people don't blame Wilson because it was Wilson who sent Americans by
Yes.
the hundreds of thousands to tip the balance in favor of Britain and France so that they could do this. He's the one who should be lynched when we all go to hell and find him and tear him limb from limb. But anyway, the lesson, though, of Versailles was one, oh, we should have stayed in the League of Nations, blah, blah, blah. But two, it was after World War II. We don't let Britain and France, they're not dominant. We're dominant after World War II. We're not coming home. We're staying over there. But we, unlike our unwise friends, we are going to rebuild Germany and Japan, and we are going to befriend them. We're not going to conquer them. We're not going to strip them of their land. We're going to build them up. We're going to save their ass, and we're going to make them our friends. But you see the dynamic there. America occupied Germany and Japan, West Germany and
Mm-hmm.
Japan, and America had Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union to hang over their head.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, would you prefer we turn you over to the tender mercies of Joseph Stalin? I'm sure he'll take real good care of you.
Yeah.
And so then the West Germans said, nine, actually, we'll go along with you guys. Right? Same thing for the Japanese. Would you prefer to be occupied by Joe Stalin? No, we'll take MacArthur,
Yeah.
Douglas MacArthur
It
instead.
sounds
Thank
like
you very much.
American politics. You want communism or fascism? Well, I don't want either. Well, pick one, motherfucker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or okay, I'll settle for the Republican, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay. So that was what happened. But see, at the end of the Cold War, they invoked the lessons of Versailles. They go, we got to remember the lessons of Versailles. We don't want to pick on the Russians. We don't want to
Mm-hmm.
humiliate them. We don't want to be jerks and turn them into Nazis. But then what did they do though? The problem was they didn't occupy Moscow, and they didn't have Moscow to hang over Moscow's head to threaten them with,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they didn't have anything like the control over Russia that they did have over Germany and Japan after the Second World War. So then the question really came down to then now, are we really going to build Russia up when we don't pwn their ass?
Good
And
point.
we could build them up quickly and then they can turn on us. Now, if they had been wise and if they had been good sports, they would have said, yes, do it anyway. It's worth the risk because you're gonna build up so much goodwill by
Stability in their
being their
area.
friends.
You don't
That's
have to
right.
be their police. Yes.
But again, just like we talked about with the Fed, these politicians, they have these short time horizons. They have
Hmm.
high time preferences, right?
Most of them
They're
are
not looking
70, 80.
forward.
They're going to die anyway. Yeah.
That's right. So in the campaign of 1996, is Bill Clinton thinking about, man, is this going to cause a war in 2022? No, he's thinking, I got to get these Polish votes in Illinois.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to promise NATO expansion, and we'll let Joe Biden worry about the mess in 2022. I'm sure that'll be fine, right? Um, and so anyway, one, they didn't really control Russia, so they weren't really willing to befriend them. But then two, they did want to stay in Europe and expand their dominance in Europe. But in doing so, and incorporating all these European nations in Eastern Europe and even far Eastern Europe into our NATO alliance, we, by default, like in essence, no matter the motive, we are literally threatening them with our military alliance by
Yeah.
extending it all the way to their border, right up to their border, in their front yard, so to speak,
That's
in a
what
way
led up
that
to the Ukraine shit, dude. Yeah.
that's
It's
right.
like if you moved your neighbor's fence all the way to your, backyard or vice versa, then you'd be like, yo, dude, what the hell? Where'd my yard go? Yeah.
And then, so what happens is when they object, our side goes, see how they are? Man, they just do nothing but say all of these, rowdy things about our virtuous, angelic, wonderful, perfectly virginal and pure policy that we
Hmm.
only ever mean well. It's a defensive alliance, pal. I don't know what your problem is, right? Take your same analogy. I'm moving into your yard and I'm bringing an armed gang with me. But hey, just stay inside, dude. Right?
You
What?
don't have to worry about it. Yeah, that's also the irony of like, well, we're not going to just take your whole yard today. We're just going to like for the next 30 days take 1 inch of your yard. We're going to take your chain link fence and move it closer to your house 1 inch at a time, like a frog in the boiling pot. You don't realize it's moving until you go to open your back door and you're like, yo, what the hell? Oh shit, there's a chain link fence right here. Like it's right there at your back door at this point. And I mean, that's a great like dude, seriously, I could talk to you all day, man. Like, unfortunately, I got to hop in the shower and I got to go play a show tonight. But man,
Cool.
I seriously, I would love to do this again sometime. And
Sure.
I like to just feel out. Like anytime I have somebody on the first time, we jump around. I drink a couple beers and just have some fun with it and see like let's feel out all of it. But next
Sure.
time it would be awesome to like really dive into like yeah the UN and all that shit going into like moving that border with the
Hey,
Ukraine
man,
war and
re-
everything that moved up to it. But what were you gonna say?
read my book, Provoked.
That's what I was gonna segue
You'll
into.
love
Is
it.
like I have not read
That's
your
what it's
book
all
yet,
about.
but exactly. Provoked is an exact awesome way to summarize this. Is that like the American West for the longest time has gone, hey, look, we got to go take out these bad guys. Well, why are they bad guys all of a sudden? Well, don't worry about that right now. But they're just bad guys. And then you're like, wait a minute, let's go back about 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You're like, oh shit, they were provoked, just like Ron Paul says, blowback, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. The Giuliani moment, all those things. It's like,
Yep.
how dare you say, like, no, fuck you. How dare you come and say that we haven't extended our, long arm of the law across
Yeah.
the flat earth, the round earth, cube earth, hollow earth, whatever shape it is. I don't give a fuck. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we've extended our military side into every angle, and then we get mad when somebody gets pissed, and you're like,
Yeah.
what would
And
you
the thing
do?
is, even if you really liked one president or another, which was surprising to me, I don't know, but like if you really just be honest and think about it, like we really, our country, since the end of the last Cold War, our country has been run by the Bushes, McCain, the Clintons, Joe Biden,
Hmm.
right? This is who's been in charge. Face biting rapist Bill was the one who was calling these shots.
Hmm.
George W. Bush, the cross eyed illiterate idiot, was the one who made these bad choices. Barack Obama, the butcher of Damascus,
The
right? Like, or
closeted fag
whatever.
too, but yeah.
He, yeah, he's got a lot of them, man, whatever you want to call his nickname. These are not good men. And Joe Biden and John McCain, these are the two loudest mouth, know it all, know nothing, blowhard idiots that you could have possibly had to lead our House of Lords over generations. I mean, those two men were dominant from the 80s through
Hmm.
only the last couple of years. They were the ones who really ran that Senate. And they're both completely stupid. They're
Yeah.
both absolute, John McCain, his IQ was probably like flat 100, right?
We got
Absolute
Lindsey Graham
idiot.
now.
Yeah. And the same for the lot of them. So if you go, hey, man, don't you talk bad about America? Well, how about I just talk bad about Bill Clinton and John McCain? They're the
Right.
ones who are calling these shots. They're not America. That's just one rapist and his buddy, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's like when you say anything bad about Netanyahu, are you anti-Semitic? No, I'm anti
Yeah,
fucking another government of another country that like if that's the irony. Guys, Stitt-Heads, as I'm coming to a close, the irony, the focus on this. You can talk shit about your elected politicians. It doesn't mean you're talking shit about your country. It's like the meme
of
where you
course.
see Dale Gribble from King of the Hill, and it says, how much do you trust your government? It's got him smoking a cigarette, and it says, how much do you love your country? And he got Bill Dotrieve with his shirt off and an American flag
Right.
behind him. I love my country. I hate my government. You know, just because I can talk shit about another country's government doesn't mean I'm talking shit on anti-Semitism or anything like that. It's
Right.
another government of piece of shit millionaire billionaires that are ruling your life, and they're telling you what is right and wrong and what you can and cannot do law wise. And at the end
Yep.
of the day, they're just oligarchs. They're all pieces of shit. They would not piss on you if you were on fire walking next to them. They would bitch that you're in their way as they're walking down the sidewalk.
Totally
Scott,
true.
Scott fucking Horton, dude, you are awesome, man. I would love to do this again, but dude, I'll put all your links in the show notes as I always do with my guests. But remind everybody where they can find you, your books, and yeah, dude,
Sure.
let's do this again if you got some free time sometime.
Yeah, just stop by my X account, man, on Twitter. It's Scott Horton Show, and I have all my links in the top in my bio there. Most important is the new Scott Horton Academy for a long form education, get you all caught up on all this stuff if people want to check that out.
Awesome. Well, hey man, I seriously, I can't thank you enough. Your assistant Rachel, she was awesome as hell. Right from the
He
first
is.
couple emails, she was telling me that man, you're really professional on GitHub. I'm like, I didn't say this to her, but I'm like, ma'am, I want to tell you, like, I'm like, freaking Al Qaeda in a damn cave with a laptop. I'm like, I'm just in my bedroom with a microphone, but thank you. Like, you guys have been cool as hell on setting this up, and yeah, dude, just God bless. You're awesome. You're a great wealth of knowledge, and I cannot thank you enough for your time.
Thanks, man. Happy to do it.
All right, dude, Stitt-Heads. Hope you enjoyed this one because I enjoyed the hell of it. I think I got a little chub going on. I'm joking, wink, wink. But I'll see you next time, guys. Don't forget, put the ass in classy. Peace out. Bye.